The old Weber house, perched at the end of Bramblewood Lane, had always fascinated me. Known throughout town as the Clockmaker's house, it was filled with intricate timepieces, each ticking away the seconds in perfect, eerie unison. When Mrs. Weber, now a widow, called me to babysit her grandson, Tommy, I jumped at the chance, driven by both a need for the job and an intense curiosity about the house. Mrs. Weber was frail and spoke softly, but her eyes were sharp as she gave me a tour of the creaking, wood-paneled home. "Tommy is a good boy, but he's imaginative," she explained, her voice trailing off as she glanced towards the staircase. "He talks about playing with the little clockmaker. Humor him, but don't let him stay up past his bedtime. Never past midnight." Tommy, a spirited 8-year-old with a mop of unruly hair, grinned up at me as his grandmother left. "Want to see the clocks?" he asked, barely containing his excitement. The house was indeed a labyrinth of ticking, whirring clocks, their hands meticulously marking the passage of time. The largest clock, a grandiose grandfather clock in the living room, drew my attention with its hypnotic pendulum. We played board games and read stories, but as the night wore on, Tommy became restless. He kept glancing towards the grandfather clock, its chimes marking the hours in deep, sonorous tones. "When it strikes 12, you'll see him," Tommy whispered, a mix of fear and excitement in his eyes. "See who?" I asked, a chill running down my spine despite my rational mind. "The little clockmaker. He comes out to fix the clocks at midnight. He likes company." I laughed it off, checking the time. It was only 11 p.m. We headed upstairs for bedtime, the house's many clocks ticking a chorus that seemed to quicken with every step we took. I read Tommy a bedtime story, and soon, he was asleep, his breathing steady and calm. Descending the stairs, I decided to wait in the living room until Mrs. Weber returned. As the clock hands crept towards midnight, I felt an inexplicable sense of dread. The ticking of the clocks grew louder, more insistent. Then, as the grandfather clock struck 12, silence fell, a heavy, suffocating silence that felt completely unnatural. The air grew cold, and I turned just in time to see a small, shadowy figure at the foot of the grandfather clock. It was a boy, no older than Tommy, dressed in outdated clothing, his eyes hollow, his fingers stained with oil and grime. "You're not Tommy," he said, his voice a whisper of gears and springs. "But you'll play with me, won't you?" Before I could move or scream, the clocks all started again, their ticking now out of sync, creating a cacophony that disoriented me. I stumbled back, and when I looked again, the boy was gone. Mrs. Weber returned shortly after, finding me pale and shaken. "Did you meet the little clockmaker?" she asked, not surprised but rather resigned. I nodded, unable to articulate my fear. "He's lonely," she sighed, a sad smile flickering on her lips. "He was my son, you know, an accident with one of the machines, but he never left. He can't leave his clocks." I never returned to the Weber house, the memory of that night haunting me. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I swear I can hear the distant sound of ticking and a small, whispery voice asking me to come back and play, forever marking the time until perhaps I do. It was supposed to be a simple Saturday night babysitting job in the old Victorian house at the end of Willow Lane. The place had always given me the creeps with its towering gables and shadowy alcoves, but the pay was good, and I needed the money for college. The Thompsons were a nice couple, if a bit odd in their mannerisms, and their daughter, Lily, was a sweet 4-year-old with a wild imagination. They seemed anxious as they prepared to leave, their instructions more stern than usual. "Do not let Lily out of your sight, not even for a moment." As the door clicked shut behind them, the house seemed to exhale, the silence settling around us like a thick blanket. Lily tugged at my hand, her small voice breaking the quiet. "Let's play hide and seek. I'll hide, and you seek." Before I could agree, she scampered off. I counted to 10, then began my search, expecting to find her tucked away in a closet or under a bed. Instead, I found the house empty, Lily's giggles echoing faintly from somewhere above. The sound drew me to the attic door, which stood ajar. Odd, since the Thompsons had specifically said it was off-limits. The stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended, calling out softly, "Lily, are you up here?" The attic was cluttered with old furniture and boxes. Dust motes danced in the beams of my flashlight as I searched, the air growing inexplicably colder. Then I heard her, Lily's voice, not giggling now, but whispering urgently as if in conversation. I followed the whispers to a dim corner where Lily sat on the floor, her back to me, her head cocked as if listening. "Lily?" I approached cautiously. She turned, her face pale, her eyes wide. "He wants to play too," she whispered, pointing to the empty space beside her. Chills ran down my spine as I glanced around the shadowy attic, seeing no one. "Who wants to play, Lily?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The boy in the walls," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He's lonely." I took her hand, intending to lead her downstairs, but as we moved, the temperature dropped sharply and a small voice echoed through the attic, "Don't go." I frozen, and as I looked back, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was only the suffocating emptiness and boxes that seemed to shift slightly in the dim light. We hurried downstairs, but the sense of being watched didn't leave us. Back in the living room, Lily clung to me, her playful mood gone. The rest of the night passed in an anxious silence, broken only by the occasional creak and whisper of the house settling. Or so I told myself. When the Thompsons returned, they found us huddled together on the sofa, the lights all blazing. I recounted what had happened, expecting disbelief, but their faces grew solemn. "We've heard him too," Mrs. Thompson confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's why we don't go up there. We hoped it would be different for you." As I left, the weight of their gazes followed me down the lane, the night air echoing with the faint whispers of the boy who was left behind in the walls of the old Victorian house. Now, when I pass by Willow Lane, I can't help but wonder about the boy, about Lily, and about the secrets that old houses keep hidden away in their shadowy corners. I had never babysat for the Carters before, but everyone in town knew their majestic, albeit slightly run-down, mansion on Hillcrest Drive. Rumored to be haunted, it stood as a Gothic monument among modern homes, its history as rich as it was chilling. When Mrs. Carter called, needing a sitter for their 7-year-old son, Oliver, I couldn't resist the allure of the old house and its secrets. The evening began like any other babysitting job. Mrs. Carter gave a brief tour, her voice echoing slightly too loudly in the vast halls, and laid out Oliver's bedtime routine with meticulous detail. "Make sure he's in bed by 8, and whatever you do, don't go into the basement," she added, her tone a mix of stern warning and fear. Oliver was a quiet child, his pale eyes reflecting a maturity beyond his years. We spent the early part of the evening playing board games and reading books. Yet, as the grandfather clock in the hallway struck 8, Oliver's demeanor changed. He became anxious, his eyes darting to the shadowy corners of the room. I tucked him into bed, the dim light of the nightlight casting long shadows across his room. "Can you check the closet? And under the bed? He hides there," Oliver whispered, pulling the covers up to his chin. "He?" I paused, a shiver running down my spine. "Who's he, Oliver?" "The shadow boy. He doesn't like the light. Humoring his fears, I checked under the bed and opened the closet. Both were empty. I offered a reassuring smile and left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar per his request. While walking down the stairs to the living room, the house creaked and groaned around me, as if breathing. I settled onto the sofa. I tried to distract myself with a book, but the silence of the house was oppressive, every small noise amplified. Around midnight, a soft thumping sound echoed from upstairs. Thinking Oliver might have gotten out of bed, I went to check on him. As I approached his room, the noise grew louder, more frantic. I pushed the door open and my heart raced. Oliver's bed was empty. The thumping led me to the closet, and hesitantly, I opened it. Oliver was inside, his eyes wide with terror, pointing to the far corner of the dark space. "He's here," he whimpered. I flicked on the light, the brightness revealing nothing but stacks of old toys and clothes. "There's nothing here, Oliver. See? You're safe." But as I turned to lead him back to bed, a cold gust of air swept through the room, and the door slammed shut behind us. The light bulb flickered violently, then burst, plunging us into darkness. Oliver screamed, and in the beam of my flashlight, I caught a glimpse of something moving, a shadowy figure, small like a child, darting away behind the racks of clothes. My heart was pounding real fast. I grabbed Oliver, and we rushed out of the room. I didn't stop to look back. We spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, the brightest room in the house, waiting for his parents to return. When Mrs. Carter arrived home, her face paled at our appearance. "Did you see him?" was all she asked. I nodded, unable to find the words. She sighed, a mixture of relief and sorrow crossing her features. "We thought he might be lonely, looking for a friend," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "We hoped he'd find peace." As I left the Carter house that night, the chill of the unseen boy's presence lingered, a haunting reminder that some houses hold more than just the living. They echo with the footsteps of the past, forever replaying the silent cries and whispers of those left behind.